finding podcasts they listen to. You mentioned Joe Rogan. There were others that he went to as well. But Donald Trump, wherever he can find an audience, he is happy to show up. And I think that was a winning strategy as well, not going to just the traditional media, but going to other things that we may not know about, but that draw a very sizable audience, not mainstream properties, but they got to the right audience for Donald Trump to get people to show up at the polls. I think you're absolutely right. I think those podcasts played an enormous role in Donald Trump's victories. Again, just working away at the edges, getting a few here, a few there. That's a sort of patchwork strategy that seems to have worked so well in ostensibly getting Donald Trump over the top and getting to that 270 plus electoral votes.
Working away at the edges and building it over time and performing perhaps in so many ways better in this election than he did in two previous campaigns. Mark Updegrove, his presidential historian, appreciate your insight always. Thank you for joining us this early in the morning. Appreciate it, Mark. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with much more of our live coverage here. Now, 4:35 in the morning. We knew we'd be here in the wee hours of the morning, and we'll see if we can make a call anytime soon. We'll see you right back here after the break.
Thousands of miles, hundreds of cars, one special place. I'm Jay Leno, and this is my garage. Join me and my guests as we pop the hood on some of the coolest cars around. Look at that. 200 rolls? What they get for ride? Explode? Or makes a whole bunch of noise? We got it. Action-packed episodes of Jay Leno's Garage. Favorite Read TV to watch now. The legend begins all over again. It's bigger.
Oh my God.
Better. And more intense than ever before. Welcome back to Fear Factor. 5 teams, 5 runs, 1 winner. Fear Factor.
We always admired power.
You got this camera.
He's being found out, and he's not going to come to justice.
The stories behind the crimes.
Would he have committed the murder if it were not for social media?
The evidence suggested that it was premeditated.
And the people behind the stories.
She's just a joy.
He offered her love and gave her death.
All day, it was a gruesome scene. Every day.
What did he do? What did he do to her?
On your free destination for true crime. Total Crime. What did you just say?
You interrupted my meditation.
Now it's personal.
The Come On Down Shuffle. Bob, I hear it.
Come on down.
The price is right. Bob, I hear it.
So come on down. The Price is Right. The Barker era.
Hey, Luke, I am so excited to host the CMA Awards again.
Nashville, here we come.
Lady, what are you doing here?
I'm hosting the CMA Awards with y'all. I think I can add something you ain't never had before.
Like what?
Like humor, style, a little bell-bottom flair.
I guess we do need you, lady.
That's the spirit. Y'all ready to do this?
I can pull off bell bottoms.
Sure you can, buddy.
When Wednesday night.
Oh my
We're back. Biggest and best season yet.
Oh, no, man.
John Keown is here.
Here we go.
So the question is,
What would you do?
You see somebody in trouble, try to help. Can I give you a hug?
Cheers in your eyes.
Thank you for standing up for us.
Oh my God! It's what would you do? I'm on it, girl.
now on Wednesday nights on ABC. This is ABC News coverage of Election Night 2024. Here again, David Muir.
Welcome back to ABC News Live coverage here, election headquarters here in New York. We gathered to be here until early hours. We didn't quite know we'd be here at 4:39 in the morning, waiting to call the race, but that's exactly what we're doing. Our decision desk wants us to be absolutely sure before we project where we all really believe that obviously this is headed. I do want to talk about a potential Trump transition team here and the roles of some of these folks that we've seen on the campaign trail and what we expect to see from them. First of all, RFK Jr., Elon Musk, huge parts of this campaign. Elon Musk is already involved with the federal government, has huge federal projects. How does this work? What kind of role does he play in this administration? What are we going to see?
Well, David, as you remember, when this was first came up, the idea that Elon Musk would head up an efficiency commission to make proposals on how to make government more efficient. But then it evolved into a Department of Government Efficiency. Now, unclear that's really going to happen. Neatly spells out Doge. He's, of course, Dogecoin is his big cryptocurrency. Seems more of like an inside joke, but clearly Musk is prepared to play some kind of a role, and it became kind of part of the campaign shtick. I mean, this was the big, the famous Madison Square Garden rally. Elon Musk was right up there talking up what he was going to do with Howard Lutnick, who was leading or co-leading the Trump transition team, promising they were going to cut a couple of $1 trillion out of the federal budget. I mean, this was part of the campaign.
At one point, he did say prepare for some temporary hardship, right?
He said prepare for some temporary hardship. Well, we'll have some temporary hardship will be followed by a great period of prosperity. And, of course, the Harris campaign shot back and said, oh, it's easy for you, the richest man on the planet, to talk about some temporary hardship. Bobby Kennedy's a bit different. Kennedy has clearly been promised that he will have a major role in determining health policy writ large in a Trump administration. That doesn't necessarily mean that he would be the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, but he has been, and I talked to him about this just a few days ago, he has been preparing lists of names for potential cabinet secretaries. By the way, health writ large means Department of Health for our food supply, food stamps, and all of that. And Bobby Kennedy is of the belief that Trump has given him free rein to basically be the decider on these major issues. And I don't know if you know it, but when Trump spoke, he said, Bobby can do anything. We just got to keep him out of energy. Because, of course, Bobby Kennedy made his name as a political activist, as an environmentalist. And Donald Trump's the guy who said global warming is a hoax, and he wants to drill, baby, drill, baby, drill. I asked Bobby Kennedy about that, and he said, well, actually, you can do more to combat global warming in the area of agriculture, which you can do a lot. I mean, there's fertilizers and all that. But look, I think both of them are gonna have significant roles. Whether or not Musk actually makes the leap into government, I'm skeptical of. I think it probably actually won't happen.
But RFK Jr. clearly will be an advisor inside the White House, and whether or not it's a cabinet position, obviously that remains to be seen. But he's known, he's anti-vaccine, talked about removing fluoride from drinking water. Are these real proposals that you think will?
I mean, look, he's been on the anti-vaccine thing. He is one of those that has argued autism. This is something we've seen with some, people usually associated with the far right, like Michelle Bach. But he clearly believes he's going to have a major role. And look, there are others. I mean, the lawyer in charge of the lawyers on his legal team. He's the person with him by his side. So many times he's at the center of many of the indictments, not indicted himself, but mentioned as a key figure in the January 6th case, both the federal case and also the Georgia case. He's somebody who Catherine Falders has done some, or Catherine phenomenal reporting, looking at their plans for lawyers throughout the executive branch, not just the attorney general. And, Epstein has been drawing up the list of possible names. And those were the guardrails that were on Donald Trump: White House counsel, attorney general.
And is Don Jr. playing a role in this transition? How big is that role?
He certainly, he probably played maybe the decisive role in the single most important personnel decision.
J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance. So I think it's unclear exactly what role, if any formal role, Don Jr. will play, but he certainly got his father's ear, and he certainly has the ear of the vice president.
What do you expect from J.D. Vance as vice president-elect? If and when we make the projection, but how do you see him in the White House as vice president?
Well, I think he's going to be obviously serving Donald Trump. I think it's important that he doesn't overstep what President Trump makes public opinion. And something that I think will continue in this White House, no matter how much different people think they're going to get cabinet positions and who's entitled to what. Donald Trump will make the decision, but a lot of those decisions are going to be driven by how things are perceived as the decision is being made. And that's something that I don't see changing.
When I went through this 8 years ago and ran the transition up through the week after the election, weekly meetings during the campaign about what was going on in the transition and what people were being put on short lists for all these different jobs. And those meetings didn't occur just with Donald Trump, but they occurred with Don Jr. and Eric and Ivanka and Jared. These things were foisted upon him. But Reince and I sat in rooms together where suggestions were made to him about what to do, but he was always the one making these decisions. And I agree with Reince that it's amazing if he feels like someone is getting one of two things: either getting too far out front, they're going to get dragged back, and if he feels like they're not getting good reaction out there, we've seen this on the campaign trail, act like he doesn't even know who they are. So Mark Robinson, got bad stuff in North Carolina. And we saw that with any number of folks that, were proposed even by Donald Trump himself, and then got pulled back. And so, look, as far as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is concerned, if I were him, I wouldn't take that promise and try to borrow money on it. Okay? When he starts to get vetted by the press, by Capitol Hill, for whatever role he's going to have, it's going to be some very interesting stuff that's going to come up. And Donald Trump doesn't like those kind of problems and having to deal with them. And he can forget a promise in 5 seconds. You're going to be X, whatever X would be. I'd love to do it, but I can't because this or that happened. That's the way he operates. And so if I were RFK Jr., I'd take a deep breath and, not be running around telling people you're going to be in charge of all this stuff. It may not last until December, let alone into the administration.
Do you have any guesses, Governor, as to who might help shepherd this? Any names that we know other than some of the people who've been on the campaign trail and have supported Donald Trump in this third run?
Look, I think Susie Wiles will play a big role in this. And you saw her tonight, smart, didn't say a word, got invited to the microphone, wouldn't do it, went right back to 3 rows back on the stage, and he likes that. He likes to call you up, and he likes if you'll step back. So I think she'll play a role in it, and I think the family always plays a role in it. There's no doubt the family plays a huge role in it, and Don Jr. will play a big role in a lot of these selections, and now he'll team with JD. I suspect that the two of them will try to get certain people that they agree on to move in. This is a family operation. Don't ever forget that Donald Trump has spent his whole life in a family business. And he thinks it's the way it's supposed to work.
let me get to the point that we talked about earlier in the night, which is once you starts being empowered by the fact that the Senate really looks like it's picked up a multitude of Republican senators tonight. How many do we think now that they've gained?
Yeah, let's take a look at where things stand. The outlook for 2025, 51 seats held by Republicans now. They flipped, David. I was just taking a look at where things stood in Nevada, where you have Jackie Rosen running against Sam Brown. This is a lead that has narrowed in the last hour or so. Now he's ahead by just over 1,000 votes. I mean, she's at 47.2, he's at 47.3. Jackie Rosen was trying to run independent of Vice President Kamala Harris. She did not attend the DNC. She was running ads in the state, as many Democrats were in some of these critical battlegrounds, talking about how she bucked Biden on immigration, for example, how she's going to be an independent senator. And you could see just how she compares to Vice President Kamala Harris here. Vice President Kamala Harris getting 46% of the vote, Jackie Rosen 47, Donald Trump 51, Sam Brown 47. These two were out on the campaign trail together within the last couple of days.
Looks like some people just skipped the Senate race. But do you have what Rick has, that tool that shows where the outstanding vote is?
Shit!
Are there sort of Democratic counties where
that encompasses Reno? 74% of the vote is in so far here. She's ahead by 5,000. And also Vegas, Clark County, where 80% of the vote is still in here. So 1,000 votes.
Yeah, no, I would think that we're looking at a balance of power in the Senate. Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, we haven't called that yet, right? Eric Updike.
That's right. And so Bernie Moreno, someone that former President Donald Trump endorsed in the primary. Of course, this now means that Donald Trump has handpicked essentially two of the Ohio senators, one being his current running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. Montana is going to be a really interesting one here. I mean, John Tester, a third-generation farmer from this state, really campaigning on the Montana values. Again, someone who tried to keep Vice President Kamala Harris also at a distance here. I've been paying attention to a few counties in the state, including Cascade County. No Democrat has ever won statewide office in Montana without winning this county. Tester right now ahead barely, just 779 votes. Obviously, this is a red state, but this is just another one that Republicans could potentially pick up here. And it just shows you, even just looking at the blue wall, David, again, just all of these races, extremely close. When we go to Michigan, Elisa Slotkin, Mike Rogers, she's at 47. He's at 49. And then, of course, Pennsylvania, all-important Pennsylvania. Bob Casey, someone who is really well known in this state. His family name, his dad served as governor. You have McCormick right now, who is ahead at 49. Again, you have to think about these senators who have held these seats for quite some time, have never had to run on the ballot with former President Donald Trump. And that is the difference in this race.
Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Mark, do we have Frank with us? Frank Lentz, Republican strategist and pollster, with us here now. Frank, can you hear me? It's David Muir here in New York.
Yes, I can. It's a privilege to do this.
No, I appreciate it. It's a privilege for us, especially since it's 4:54 in the morning and you're willing to join us this late in the game. I'm really curious by a couple of things you posted on social media. You argue that Kamala Harris lost this election when she pivoted to focus almost exclusively on attacking Donald Trump, particularly in those final weeks. You're convinced of that?
I'm convinced of it, and it was fascinating because she was gaining and gaining. Here's a candidate in our focus groups that had impressed the public with her energy, her enthusiasm, and she peaked at the convention when she was talking about what she was for rather than what Donald Trump was against. And all that changed in the last 6 weeks. And I did this wrong. I concluded that Trump did so badly in the debate that there would be no way that he could challenge her. And the fact is that the debate this time mattered less. And in the end, she turned on Trump, started to call him a fascist, started to use her most vicious terminology for him, is when she started to fall. And the fact is, this race was winnable for her, that she could have done it based on what she would have done in the first day, the first week, the first month, the first year, who they liked Vice President Harris.
That's really interesting. So let me just drill down on that. You did focus groups right up until the very end. And your conclusion is they didn't like him, but they didn't trust her.
Exactly. And in the end, they had to know where she stood. She never crossed the threshold. And this is going to be the conversation we're going to have for days and weeks. She never crossed the threshold of credibility. Why she changed her position on certain issues. What she would do when she got the chance to do the job. And the fact is, she should have challenged the president. She should have challenged Joe Biden. And she should have separated herself, differentiated herself, and she didn't do it. And in the end, voters did not like Donald Trump. These final undecided voters, these persuadable voters, they didn't like Trump. They liked her more. But on the key issues, and the only two issues that mattered in the end was this affordability and security, defined by immigration. Because she didn't define herself, they ended up with Trump and not with Harris.
Really interesting. I want to bring John Carl on this, who's raising his hand, Frank, to ask you a question. And you heard, John, what he just said there. He said in the focus groups, they liked her more, but she didn't address affordability and security, border security.
And I was struck, Frank. I want to ask you. You said that she made a mistake when she turned to the negativity to call them a fascist, and that was a decisive movement in the wrong direction. But in the final days of this campaign, Kamala Harris stopped, in some cases, talking about Donald Trump. She ended on a positive message in the final days of the campaign. It was Trump who went into a deep, dark place in the final days of the campaign. So how do you square that?
Because it was probably did hurt him what happened in Madison Square Garden. And in our last session, several of our undecided voters brought that up, saying that's exactly what they wanted to avoid. And the way that they communicated this, and some of this was published in the New York Times yesterday on Election Day, that they closed their eyes and they held their nose and they chose Trump because in the end, they had more faith in him delivering on the issues that mattered than they did her. That she should have done this earlier in the campaign, and by the last 96 hours, it was already too late for her.
Frank, I've got Lindsay Davis here with me too. Lindsay.
And I am curious, because we discussed it earlier, the potential that race and gender played a role. Did you hear anything with regard to that in your focus groups?
Well, this is amazing to me that women endorsed her and embraced her and saw her as someone who represented them and looked like them. But what happened was she pushed away men. And this is something that she probably was not accounting for, which is in the ad, she saw women all around her. In the ad, she focused on issues that women would embrace, lessen that gender gap, not by raising the vote of women, but by not alienating men. And what they said was, it was not necessarily an endorsement of Donald Trump. It wasn't an endorsement of the Republican Party. But in these sessions, they said, and you can see this on we've been collecting these focus groups, and they're on this site, America Speaks on Straight Arrow News. They said that they felt like they had no place in the Democratic Party anymore. People who voted for Hillary Clinton and voted for Joe Biden, but they found her as prioritizing women at their expense. And that's why they ended up supporting and not having.
Campaign are going to pour through all of that material as well. They had their own focus groups going. Frank, I'm curious. I did see someone pretty high up in the campaign in the final days to say that their focus groups showed that the undecideds in the end were breaking their way. Didn't indicate breaking completely in Harris's direction. Certainly not 9 out of 10, but saying that maybe 6 out of 10 is what they were starting to see in some of the focus groups, and that was encouraging. You weren't seeing that. The undecideds in your focus groups turned Trump's way in the end?
They turned Trump. They didn't want to. They turned Trump's way out of regret, out of disappointment, even out of frustration. And David, you can tell by their body language. You can tell by the tone of their voice that these are people who were so reluctant in casting their vote, but they were going to vote. They were going to participate, and they were not going to throw that vote away. It mattered too much to them. And that they are not Republican, and they are not part of the Trump constituency. But in the end, it disappointed them, and they did so out of regret even in some cases out of embarrassment, but they felt that the Democrats had left them rather than that they had left the Democrats.
Really interesting. Frank Luntz, Republican strategist and pollster. Frank, always appreciate your insights, and this is sort of invaluable in hearing what some of the voters were telling you. Thank you, Frank. We'll be back with much more of our early morning election coverage here on ABC. Live coverage continues just after 5 here in the morning, and we'll see if we're any closer to making an official projection here right after the break.
Who are you? Did you recognize me? We've done it again. He's changed.
I am he, and he is me.
This isn't an ordinary ship, you know, this is a time machine.
We have come for you.
Hey, get in here.
Death is always more frightening when it strikes invisibly. Our supreme plan to control the universe.
Yes, I've heard all that before.
And that's where they keep yeah. Never mind.
Welcome backstage. This way you get all access to all the juicy details.
Whitney couldn't handle it.
From the hot mess to the hot mess.
Lorene's autobiography has destroyed Earth.
Notorious scandals and crimes.
I don't need to kill anyone.
Feel-good success stories.
Here we are, getting a Hollywood star.
And criminally good movies.
You don't seem too upset.
I'm traumatized.
I'd like you to move that mother.
Backstage. Watch now.
Sweet, Liza Koshy. I want to help other immigrants give back to their selfless, deserving parents.
My mom's the most selfless person I know.
I believe you've done something about it. And we're going to prove it.
For today's most outrageous crimes. The most exciting body cam videos. Police interrogations. Wild jail moments. And crazy pop highlights.
I hope you learn a lesson from this.
Black. We celebrate black culture.
Yes.
With big stars and epic movies.
Said your phone.
Can we change the subject?
You're gonna have to talk to somebody if you want to check, sweetie.
Everything you are, everything you have. Cause it's black. Shades of Black. Watch now.
Look at all these happy wedding guests.
I'm getting married.
Jeff, are you crying? I'm a sucker for love.
Oh, this
You have to help me. He's going to be right now. I just wonder what to do. Go down.
This is all my fault.
Yeah, you want to have some fun?
What did you have in mind?
I gotta talk to you, buddy. I have nothing to hide. One invasion. One plan.
Switch you out, Elizabeth Ross Quinn.
I'm not gonna make the same mistake I made with your father.
Good.
I had separate ways.
It appears we have what's called an impact. The impact is a situation that has no apparent solution. How can we resolve a situation of this nature?
Keep.
No.
It's be fun.
Bahana is open for business.
America's newest ABC series, now streaming 24/7 on Disney Plus. Welcome back to Election Night 2024 on ABC. Here again, David Muir.
Welcome back now, 6 minutes past 5 o'clock here in the East on this Wednesday morning after election night in America. We are very much looking at Donald Trump set to be the president-elect. We have not projected as a network officially. Obviously, the math is very much in his favor. It's looking increasingly mathematically impossible for Kamala Harris to catch up here, but we're being super careful with our decision desk. making sure that everything has been checked before we're willing to project. As you know, earlier in the evening, Donald Trump speaking in Florida, thanking his family, his supporters, and certainly the voters who put him in this position to potentially be the 47th president of the United States now. We heard Frank Lundstedt sharing with us some of his focus groups of voters in these final days, and he said he was struck by how many of them said in the focus groups that they actually liked her, but didn't trust her on the two key issues of affordability and security in this country. And when he said security, then said border security. He said the issues that were important, the most important to them, that he believes that she lost the election when she pivoted the focus almost exclusively to Donald Trump, and perhaps that was in that window when General John Kelly came forward and talked about Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris leaned in on that. She was out campaigning with Liz Cheney, who was also talking about Donald Trump. And I'm not the one who's now critiquing the campaign. I'm just based on what Frank Lutz is critiquing her about returning to focus to Donald Trump. And it'll be curious to see people who work with her and who look back at the campaign if that indeed was sort of a turning point, instead of using the final days to really lay out what she was going to do, how she's different from Joe Biden. Obviously address the fact of what others are saying about Trump, but not to allow it to feel to voters that you're exclusively focused on Trump in the final days.
And there were a lot of questions at the time, especially around the time that Mark Kelly's comments came out, and she really was sort of hammering home that message, increasingly focused on the threat that she argued that Donald Trump posed. Was there a danger going too far in that direction? And the campaign, I remember having these conversations with campaign officials, and they insisted that they could do both, right? In part, they were trying to take advantage of the news cycle. Mark Kelly had come out and made these, General Kelly, had come out and made these comments, and they wanted to seize on those because they felt that it underscored their message. But at the same time, they felt she could go out there, and balance the two, that in her campaign remarks that she could hammer Donald Trump, but also put forward her positive vision. And it perhaps may have muddled the message a bit too much. And then at the end, we saw her turning, more to this positive, optimistic message, not even mentioning Donald Trump by name in the final 24 hours of this race. But it was a question at the time because I think some in the party, especially, it sort of, their ears went up a little bit. And
those messages had been out before, as you well know. I mean, John Kelly had anonymously on background and confirmed to some people that he had actually made those comments. And the timing of that, there was no coordination with the campaign. They kind of did seize on that when he went on the record with the New York Times, and you could hear his voice actually say what he said Donald Trump told him. But over the years, we've heard all kinds of these things. We've heard John Bolton. I remember interviewing John Bolton in 2010.
Damn.
And it was jaw-dropping what he said about Donald Trump. And it didn't make any difference. And you've had one after another. You had General Mattis. You had all these other national security leaders, and it didn't make much difference. So it was interesting to me that they would seize on that so much at a time when people really didn't know her that well.
And it did mean that for a week plus, all of her agenda, her promises, for the American people weren't resonating in the same
party moving forward. I mean, Joe side for Kamala Harris. Obviously, there are other people. There's John Shapiro, who campaigned for her. There's Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. Hakeem Jeffries, who could be, we just have to see where the House lands. He's the minority leader, has the potential to potentially be sort of House Speaker at some point here. Who do you see moving forward? Who becomes the voice of the next generation of the Democratic Party? And who's going to address sort of what Terry Moran's beat has been tonight, which is to address the fact that they've got to, and you've said it too, Donna, they have to build the coalition out there. They have to reach out to the rural counties, the smaller cities, the communities in between. It can't just be the urban centers that they're counting on to drive up the vote.
Well, the good news is that Joe Biden is going to be president until January 20th. And as the president, he sits over head of the Democratic Party. So there will be a transition, and it will be made up of, I think, some of the current leadership, but there, in my humble opinion, the Democratic Party has a huge bench. We saw during that period of time when the president was deciding whether or not to stay in the race or leave the race, that there were many Democrats who were like willing to toss their hat in the ring, but they just didn't have the backing of the party and the donors and the Democratic Party infrastructure. So that will take place over the next 2 months. the most important thing right now, I think, is the vice president is waking up at some hour. Maybe we should let her know that she just should come here and get freshened up and just go straight to the stage, get it over with, so I can start moving on and we can all move on. But the truth is that the vice president is playing a small role in that transition. I say a small role because she has not been an institutionalist inside the party, but she is still someone that has to decide where she's going next. So it's a look, we're going to have a lot of fun. Hopefully we can pay less attention to the president, the former president, if he is quote unquote reelected, and we'll know sooner rather than later. But the party has a lot of resources. When I say resources, we have governors, we have senators, we have members of Congress, we have a lot of people, activists, organizations, and we're going to make sure that we put somebody forward over the next 2 years that can help rebuild this Democratic Party.
Because if you think about it, it is a one term for President Trump if he returns to the White House. Don't the Democrats have to get to work and soon if they want to put together whoever the next face?
We have gubernatorial races coming up in 2 years. We have congressional races. We have statewide races coming up. There's no question the Democratic Party is going to reassess everything. The fact that turnout in these Democratic states, some of these blue states, I keep looking at Illinois, I keep looking at Chris' home state. Chris, you should have just stopped working. No, there's a lot of work to do to rebuild not just the blue wall, but now to rebuild the entire Democratic Party infrastructure across the country so that we're not looking at these tight margins on a night we should be just focusing on the so-called battleground states.
Tim Walz. I mean, Tim Walz, is he someone who's the future of the party?
I mean, why not Wes Moore? I mean, why not, you talked about Gretchen Whitmer. We have so many governors. We have such a large bench. But I think this is a passing of the torch. Nancy Pelosi did it when she stepped down and passed the torch to Hakeem Jeffries. I think you'll see another passing of the torch across the board.
Any other names though you want to throw out there?
I'm not trying to make anybody upset. I'm already upset. It would be a tragic mistake if I didn't mention Gavin Newsom.
All right, well, there you go. Gavin Newsom, Andy Beshear, Kentucky, Josh Shapiro. These are some of the names that were thrown in when they were saying, oh, maybe we need to do a mini primary. It's just
Mayor Pete, Pritzker.
Yep,
I mean, this party has a lot of assets. But I also think that the party is going to have to take a look at 51% of the vote in Illinois. You want to, I mean, Maryland did a little better, but still, there's a lot of healing to be done. I was just receiving an email from Marianne Williamson. She's up at this hour telling the Democrats what we should be doing next. So there's going to be a lot of incoming. And I look forward to hearing everybody, you know what?
Well, I mean, what she's upset about is the fact there was no primary. I mean, she may be not exactly a central figure in the party, but there were people that were saying early on that
she received some votes, just no delegates. You know how the process works.
Well,
we're going back to the central question. After the 2022 midterm, Joe Biden made the decision on December 1st, 2022, that he would toss his hat back in the ring. He said at the time that he's the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump, and he encouraged and recommended that the Democratic Party change their calendar. We did that. We honor Joe Biden, we honor his legacy, his commitment, and when he made the decision to step back, Kamala Harris stepped forward. There's a lot of...
I think that one of the problems, Martha hit on it, these comments, these negative comments about Donald Trump from Bolton, from John Kelly, it was already in the ether. And when Kamala Harris came out, she came into this as a very unpopular person in the Democrat Party. She didn't win a single primary, she didn't win a single vote in the primary. But then all of a sudden she became this candidate that was transformed at the convention. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. And all of a sudden people said, wait a minute, you mean we don't have to name call and you guys are going to have fun and there's going to be this inspiration in Milwaukee. And then she went right back to that old playbook. And I believe that part of her problem was at that moment she became inauthentic. She became not the person that suddenly became unbelievably popular in America in 2 weeks. She went right back down to being this old playbook of name calling, and it's something that, you know, it might work for Donald Trump. It didn't work for her.
Okay, interesting. Governor,
Look, when you're looking at what the future of the Democratic Party is going to be, I think one of the things that is a constant in politics is it's defined by the personality that catches the attention and the imagination of the voters of that particular party. It's usually not any one issue that grabs them. And I understand what Donna means about having to build back, you know, a lot of this constituency, but the way you do it is to get a candidate that they're attracted to. And the best example of that for the Democrats was 2008. I mean, the fact is that they had lost to George W. Bush twice, and they were not in a good way. And then all of a sudden they got a candidate that caught people's imagination. And, you know, Terry showed that map tour of what Obama did in 2008 and what he repeated in 2012. Was that because of any one particular issue? Of course not. It was because they believed in Barack Obama. They believed he could inspire them to greater things. And so I do think mentioning the names matters, but only as a laundry list that we're going to look at. In the end, those people have to now go out and prove that they can create a following. Like Donald Trump obviously created a following, and that was not through any one issue, but through the force of his personality.
Yeah, people forget in that Democratic primary that it was a battle between the past and the future.
That's right.
Hillary represented the past. She had taken a position on the war. She was seen as the outsider. He was the newcomer to Washington, D.C. So we had a terrific battle, and it ended up energizing the party. He expanded the party. He was able to get people engaged in the party. Now, maybe that's the exercise the Democratic Party will go through. You know, all of the next steps. It starts with the vice president tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. We don't really know. Making her statement, and then we'll take it from there. And I'm sure the president is going to have something to say.
I was thinking tonight, I was trying to think about change, and a man I met in Audubon, Iowa, in 2008, just before the Iowa caucuses there. A small town. He was a farmer. I'm not making this up. He had a John Deere cap, stubble beard, missing a tooth. And I was asking about the election, and I said, what are you going to vote for? And like a lot of Iowans, he said, well, I haven't made up my mind yet. But then they went on and said, can you imagine what it would say to the world about this republic? He used that word, if he gets elected. To him, Barack Obama was change. And I think there's a continuity between Obama and Trump, which is that Americans, a lot of them, have been trying to tell the rest of us that the system wasn't working for them, whatever it was. And they saw in Barack Obama a guy who wasn't attached to it, right? He'd been a senator for a couple of years. He was from a very different background, a political talent of his generation. And they said, he's the one. And he did make some change, but not enough. And Donald Trump is now their instrument to kind of bludgeon an establishment and a way of doing things in government, whether it's trade, whether it's cultural issues, whatever. This is a populist movement that is not going to be stopped, I think is what they told us tonight.
When you talk about political talent generation, no matter who you're describing, when you say something like that, that gets right to what you need. You can have your policy positions, but you have to have a skill set to connect with the American people and to make sure that, to find a way that they feel like they're being heard. And we say this over and over again, and it applies to Democrats and Republicans, and that's the soul searching it always is for the party that doesn't win. And it will be, I'm sure, the days.
David, by the way, it's going to happen for the Republicans too. Donald Trump wins this election, which he's going to do. The next page begins to be turned. I mean, he's not going to want to hear it, but it is constitutionally require that he leave after 4 more years. And we're going to have a race inside the party, an empty seat race. And so the Republicans are going to be looking for who's the next person, who's going to try to inspire them and lead them and could perhaps continue some of the policies. This is not the end of the beginning tonight. This is the beginning. Deal with that very well, but he needs to understand it, and it's going to become a reality to him in late 2025 or early 2026.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know. I mean, I think it's yet to be seen. I think what happened tonight was so extraordinary in this country. The legacy now of Donald Trump, what leadership, what he does, obviously it's in his hands. But he could have an imprint on this party for generations.
I'm not saying I'm not saying he's not got an imprint, but he is a unique personality, and he cannot be on the ballot.
Understood. He can't be on the ballot, but if Donald Trump maintains his grip on the party that he has right now, and he has from 2016 early on, his opinion about what happens in this party, who succeeds, who's RNC chair, who is this, who is that, he could control a lot more than just any old president that's been sitting around the Oval for 4 years. I just don't see him as the typical president that, 2 years have gone by and no one cares what Donald Trump thinks. I don't think so. I think he's going to have a lot of power.
And also, it's not just Donald Trump and the Republicans. The MAGA base is a movement. And we have to come to terms with the fact that it's a movement.
And it's an enduring movement. I mean, it's the better part of a decade.
And it's grown, and they did very well. They exceeded benchmarks that the 538 team came up with for each candidate tonight. We're going to take a break. Local news for many news coming up next. We'll all stand by here after the break.
Welcome back to the ABC News Election Headquarters. I'm Andrew Dimber.
Good morning to you. I'm Rhiannon Alley. Let's get right to the results. Former President Trump calling for what he calls the golden age of America when he spoke just before 2:30 a.m.
Pennsylvania, and we recognize that some other outlets may have already called the race at this point for Trump, but our decision desk wants to be sure a Harris win is a mathematical impossibility before doing so. Now let's look at the board. Trump winning every state that he was expected to win, and then picking up Pennsylvania, which Joe Biden won back in 2020.
And Republicans have not won the popular vote in a presidential election since George W. Bush. But Trump was on track all night long to do just that.
Trump appearing with his family overnight, vowing to help the country heal.
Things are troubling for Democrats all night long. Even Minnesota, home of Governor Tim Walz, wasn't called until after 2:30 a.m. ABC's Lana Moise starts our coverage off.
This morning, former President Trump declared victory in the election.
It's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this.
Trump maintaining leads in major battleground states overnight, taking an early win in North Carolina. Exit polls showing Trump overperformed among young voters and Latinos nationally. Trump, now the first Republican presidential candidate to win Miami-Dade County since 1988, after a large number of Latino voters shifted right. ABC's Martha Raddatz spoke to Latino voters on the campaign trail.
I think what I heard was surprising in some ways. I mean, you think, the Latino vote is going to go to the Democrats. Absolutely not. It all came back to the voters I spoke to the economy.
Exit polls also show college-educated voters leaning toward Harris, but predictably blue states like Virginia, New Hampshire, and even New Jersey did not come in as early as expected. But Trump easily winning where he was expected to, including Iowa. By midnight, both campaigns laser-focused on the so-called blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
When you tick through these blue wall states, Pennsylvania, 67% of voters saying the condition of the nation's economy is not so good or poor. More of the same in Michigan, 63%, not so good or poor. Wisconsin, more of the same, 66%, not so good or poor.
Trump also winning in Pennsylvania, the biggest prize among the battleground states, with 19 electoral votes.
Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement
of all time there's ever been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond.
Harris opting to not speak overnight.
We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken.
The fact that Kamala Harris is going home tonight, I think is amateur hour.
But the Trump campaign appearing more confident well after midnight.
They have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
What you are seeing is potentially Donald Trump on the press. President who left the White House the way he left, impeached for the second time, him in the Senate, facing multiple criminal trials, indictments in 4 separate cases, convictions in the case in New York, and to face all of that, come back, recapture the Republican nomination, and be on the precipice of potentially getting back into the White House is something unlike anything we have ever seen.
I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This age of America, that's what we have to have.
And that's the latest.
Our coverage continues.
Your voice, your vote. The race for the White House. Election night 2024 continues. Here again, David Muir.
Did they just say election night 2024? Because I think we need to update that announce to election morning, 5:30 here in the East. The whole team is here. Glad you're with us at home. I'm going to get right back over to Rick Klein at the Big Board, our political director, Washington bureau chief. And Rick, obviously, we've been saying this throughout the night for our viewers. We're waiting for the decision desk to do the final map here, just to be absolutely sure of where we all see that this is headed. Can you take us through? You have Wisconsin up there right now.
Yeah.
How are we looking at Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, Wisconsin would be the clinching state for Donald Trump. So would Michigan, so would Arizona, so would Nevada, so would a combination of Alaska and the 1 congressional district in Maine, or an upset in New Hampshire. But the place that we are focused in on at this hour, at this very early morning hour, is Wisconsin. We're now down to a vanishingly small amount of the vote left, probably less than 9,000 votes in Milwaukee. The system is estimating 99% of the vote is in, but the margin is down.
Stand by, Rick. We're just going to pause here to project. And we can project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, the key battleground state of Wisconsin. It's 10 electoral votes. I believe that then makes Donald Trump now, ABC News can project that the former President Donald Trump will be the 47th President of the United States. That takes him to 276 electoral votes. There's still states on the map to be counted. Not since Grover Cleveland has someone served non-consecutive presidential terms. John Carl was talking about that earlier in the night. It's now become a reality. Again, the breaking news at 5:31 here in the East, former President Donald Trump, ABC News now projecting, will be the next president of the United States, and part of the path that he built along the electoral map is this blue wall that the Democrats were convinced would be Kamala Harris's best route to the presidency. Donald Trump winning Pennsylvania, and now he has won Wisconsin and Georgia, and a number of other battlegrounds are still being counted where he holds leads. Significant, even though we've been reporting on this, and the analysis has been excellent and careful from the whole team here all night long, but we are here, and Mary Bruce, John Carl, your first reaction here to the official news, Donald's.
Look, we said it as we approach this point. This is just an unbelievable comeback, the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States. And this is a victory unlike his 2016 victory, certainly unlike his loss in 2020. Donald Trump not only wins the Electoral College, but it looks like he has a very good chance of winning the popular vote. He comes back to the White House, rising like a phoenix from the ashes after having left in disgrace, twice impeached, facing multiple indictments, convictions here in New York. And he captures the White House in a way he didn't even do the first time, and with the strength of a significant majority in the United States Senate as well.
Mary Bruce, you cover the White House, and you know part of the calculation for so long, President Biden believed that he was best positioned to keep Donald Trump from returning to the White House, ultimately deciding after that debate performance in June that he needed to step aside. He quickly endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. There's going to be a lot of discussion, obviously, in so many Democratic circles right there in the White House about the timing, the decision, when the decision was made, the fact that they didn't do a primary or some version of a primary. If there was a better way for Democrats to be better prepared to sort of take on Donald Trump, and those questions now begin.
107-day sprint. That was what Kamala Harris had and what she tried to pull off here. It was the shortest campaign in modern American political history. The party coalesced around her quickly. They thought and felt extremely confident, cautiously confident, but confident nonetheless, many hours ago when this day began yesterday morning, that they were going to be able to pull this off because they thought that she had reached out to all of those key demographics, that she was going to expand beyond her base in a way that they argued Donald Trump simply could not do. And yet we have seen really the opposite, that she wasn't able to turn out in those big urban centers in the way that she needed. And despite painting such a dire picture of a second Trump term, ultimately it was that question of whether you are better off now than you were 4 years ago that Donald Trump hammered throughout this campaign that seems to have resonated most with voters.
We're going to pause here so that the rest of the network can join us for breaking news coverage here of our projection and yet another state to call. Let's pause here for a moment.
This is an ABC News election update. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good morning. It's now 5:35 here in the East. We are allowing all of our stations across the country to join us now with a bid to return to the White House. Not consecutive terms. We mentioned a moment ago as we were on our air with our coverage. The first is Grover Cleveland to serve non-consecutive presidential terms. Donald Trump returning to the White House as the 47th president of the United States. He does so with Wisconsin now in his win column. Of course, there are a number of states on the map that still look pretty favorable for Donald Trump tonight, but Wisconsin was the state that put him over the map, getting him to 279 at this point to Kamala Harris's 219 electoral votes. I'm going to quickly rejoin the team here so that the entire network can hear a little bit of what we're our early analysis. And John, as you and I have been saying all night long, this is an extraordinary political comeback. You say we've never seen anything like it.
Look, the greatest political comeback in American history and a victory unlike any that Donald Trump has ever seen, because not only does he win what appears to be a decisive electoral college victory, it seems like he is on the verge of winning the popular vote as well. So he comes back to the White House, remarkable when you consider the way he left the White House in January of 2021. He comes back to the White House with a mandate. The majority of the American people, it seems, ultimately, when all the votes are counted, will be saying they want Donald Trump to be president. Now, that said, David, he faces the challenge of uniting a deeply divided country. And the nearly half the country that voted against him, many of them see him as not somebody that they simply didn't want in the White House, but see him as a threat. So now the question is, how does he convince those people that he can be a president for all Americans, including those who didn't vote for him?
One of the central questions moving forward, you're absolutely right, John. One of the questions, and looking back, and there will be many of them, come for this White House. Mary Bruce, you've covered the White House now, the Biden-Harris administration. A lot of people are going to be looking to President Biden, his decision to bow out after that horrible debate performance in June, whether or not that was a decision that should have been made earlier, that would have perhaps given the Democratic Party more time to do some sort of primary, or would have given Kamala Harris more time. However it turned out, or whoever the Democratic Party chose or people voted for, perhaps that would have given them more than 107 days, which is all she had to introduce herself as a candidate at the top of the ticket.
There's certainly going to be a lot of discussions and deep soul searching, I think, within the Democratic Party about how this all unfolded, and a lot of deep questions for the president about the way he went out, really cast herself as the change candidate. That is hard to do when you are the sitting vice president. And when you look back at the fact that she wasn't able to really differentiate herself enough from the president to say to Americans who are suffering economically that what she would do in this campaign.
And will define the Biden presidency
Yes.
to a large part. And President this time thought he was best positioned to keep Donald Trump returning to the White House. That's a calculation they'll all have to look back on. Lindsay Davis, I want to bring you in here on the projection, the official projection, Donald Trump returning to the White House. You've been looking at the exit polls, and what Donald Trump did tonight was increase his margin. And some of these red counties show that he was gaining. And not only did he do that, but he peeled back some of the support in the urban areas, particularly from Latino voters. That was also something very telling.
In virtually every metric, in virtually all the things that we measure with regard to the exit polls, he increased his percentage from his points from 2020. And if you look at the top issues that people had, he's the one that they trusted. When you look at immigration, by far, there we go. It's coming up here. There we go. When you look at who do you trust to handle immigration? Donald Trump. Who do you trust to handle crime? Donald Trump. Who do you trust to handle the economy? Donald Trump. And so these were very significant issues that people said that when they were going to the polls today, that they felt were very important in their decision.
You know, we talked to Frank Luntz earlier for our special coverage here, Martha, of election night. He said he did focus groups. Many of them had favorable things to say about Kamala Harris in the focus groups, but they said they didn't know enough about her, didn't trust her on the key issues, and many of them didn't like Donald Trump, but still trusted him more on the economy and on border security.
And that's what I found talking to voters over the last year and over the last few months when Kamala Harris has been in the race, that they didn't really know her. And say what you will about Donald Trump is authentic. And I think there was a little disconnect with Kamala Harris. He didn't know quite who she was. And when she started talking so much more about Donald Trump instead of herself, instead of her own plan, people just kept saying, I don't know exactly where she stands on this and the economy. I mean, they would just flat out say, my life was better with Donald Trump. I was listening to you say, we have never seen anything like it. We're all saying that. We said that almost every day Donald Trump was president, and I'm sure we'll be saying it as we go ahead. But I want to say one thing. Donald Trump, in 2016, his inaugural speech, talking about division of the country. The Bible tells us how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. When America is united, America is totally unstoppable. As we've all said tonight, that is going to be a very, very tall order.
A very tall order for the president as he enters his second term in the White House, though not consecutive, as we pointed out, part of the history of this night. Rachel Scott, he returns to the White House with considerable power, not only given the Supreme Court ruling on immunity that we've reported plenty on here, but also emboldened with a very good turnout for Republicans in the Senate. They were lifted by Donald Trump being at the top of the ticket. He's not only going to have a majority in the Senate, it looks like he's going to have a couple of seats that give him a majority. It's not a slim one, I should say.
Yeah, that's exactly right, David. The former president will be returning back to the White House, back to Washington, and he will have a majority in the Senate. Of course,
this is so boring.
This is what the former president is going to have before him. And by the way, several of the people that won tonight were people that former President Donald Trump endorsed in the primaries as well. David, this has been a remarkable campaign, unlike any other in American history. I've been covering Donald Trump now for 591 days since his very first rally of this campaign cycle in Waco, Texas, a twice impeached former president of the United States, who at one point during this campaign was spending more time in a courtroom than out on the campaign trail. He ran this race his own way. He didn't even participate in any of the primary debates. Republicans rallying behind the former president and voters too. And all I can think about tonight is how the former president continued to start his rallies, asking his voters, his supporters, if they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. The question now for Donald Trump is how he's going to unite this nation.
Thank you, Rachel. And I guess as we always do, that half the country would not be happy with the result, the other half would be pleased, and both sort of portrayed it as a real threat to the country, the other side. But one of the things that I think that everyone can sort of agree on tonight, if we're looking for and this would take it back to Pierre, and Aaron, because we had a fairly safe election day. Actually, and we got through it just fine here.
Indeed, David. The key here issue, there were some issues that popped up with bomb threats, but the American public was resilient. They went out and voted. Law enforcement said these were all hoaxes. Don't worry about it, move ahead. But it was interesting that they did believe that in several states, including Wisconsin and Georgia, that Russia was involved in putting forth some of these hoax bomb threats.
But Pierre, David, this has to be a triumph of safety and security over deep skepticism about the integrity of the vote and a lot of disinformation.
And David, I would add one thing. At the end of the day, as someone who grew up in a working class family, economics mean a lot to people. And I remember my mom often going to the grocery store and looking at the prices with a firm price. At the end of the day, we don't elect saints. It's about the economy.
It always is, and we say that every time, and it's cliche for a reason because it's true. I believe you're still standing. You've been punching the numbers all night. We really do appreciate it. And to Rachel and Mary, who've been on this campaign trail for the better part of a couple of years, we're really grateful. And to all of you here with us here at the desk, thank you. Thank you. Vice President Kamala Harris expected to speak later today. ABC News will carry that line when it happens. Our coverage of the 2024 election will continue. For many of you, we return you to regular programming. Your local news has started here in much of the East. I'm David York. From all of us here at ABC News, thanks for being with us for almost 12 hours of election coverage. We'll see you later today.
Welcome backstage. This is where you get all access to all the juicy details.
Here we are, getting a Hollywood star.
From the hot mess to the hot mess.
I'd like to.
Backstage. Watch now.
Fisher boat's going down. Let's go.
Crazy, you know that?
I thought you liked that.
Football fans are competitive, especially when it comes to tailgating. This season, we've got new teams, new super fans here in the middle of City Park in New Orleans. Oh, I'm getting excited.
So what do you think?
It's beautiful.
How could you use my family stuff?
Like to stay a while.
I wouldn't mind at all.
Oh my gosh, guys.
What's lava? Ah! My God! Oh!
Never be so scared, dread, and yearning over me.
It's hard to talk about that life.
America's number one news, ABC News, now streaming 24/7 on Disney Plus.
Welcome back to ABC News Election Headquarters. I'm Andrew Gifford.
And I'm Maria Anali. ABC News is now projecting Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. Trump overnight promised to deliver a, quote, golden age for America.
I better
when he
pull
spoke
over.
before
I have to
2:30 a.m.
pee.
Eastern, declaring victory.
In Wisconsin and following his victory in Pennsylvania.
This morning, former President Trump declared victory in the election.
It's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this.
Trump maintaining leads in major battleground states overnight, taking an early win in North Carolina. Exit polls showing Trump overperformed among young voters and Latinos nationally. Trump, now the first Republican presidential candidate to win Miami-Dade County since 1988, after a large number of Latino voters shifted right. ABC's Martha Raddatz spoke to Latino voters on the campaign trail.
I think what I heard was surprising in some ways. I mean, you think, oh, the Latino vote is going to go to the Democrats. Absolutely not. It all came back to the voters I spoke to the economy.
Exit polls also show college-educated voters leaning toward Harris, but predictably blue states like Virginia, New Hampshire, and even New Jersey did not come in as early as expected. But Trump easily winning where he was expected to, including Iowa. By midnight, both campaigns laser-focused on the so-called blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
When you tick through these blue wall states, Pennsylvania, 67% of voters saying the condition of the nation's economy is not so good or poor. More of the same in Michigan, 63% not so good or poor. Wisconsin, more of the same, 66% not so good or poor.
Trump also winning in Pennsylvania, the biggest prize among the battleground states, with 19 electoral votes.
Okay, I'm back. Before I get back on the road, let me see how many.
Of all time, there's ever been anything like this.
Harris opting to not speak overnight.
We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to
Trying
make
to do
sure
to get more followers,
that every vote is counted,
more supporters.
that every voice has spoken.
The fact that Kamala Harris is going home tonight, I think is amateur hour.
But the Trump campaign got more confident well after midnight, when more of his senior advisors started arriving to his watch party.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country.
On the precipice of the greatest speech for the second time, 7 members of his own party voting to convict him in the Senate, facing multiple criminal trials, indictments in 4 separate cases, convictions in the case, come back, we capture the Republican nomination, and be on the precipice of potentially getting back into the White House is something unlike anything we have ever seen.
I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
The darkness of bipolar depression made me feel like life was moving on without me. Then I found a chance to let in the light. Discover.
It's my
Oh, I'm good. Oh, get the ball, get the ball.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take it. Need to know.
Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, cars, music, trends, and of course, good food.
It's all coming out on GMA3.
You're going to love it. We'll see you there.
GMA3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So what? Afternoon.
For everything you need to know.
I love that.
Me too.
This ship is heaven. There should be no guilt on a pleasure cruise. It's your job.
And President Zelensky already saying, quote, I appreciate President Trump's commitment to the peace through strength approach in global affairs.
Also, of course, there's the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated Trump this morning, saying, quote, Your historic return to the White House offers a new beginning for America.
What's clear is the repercussions of the election will be felt in just about every region of the world. ABC's Britt Clinton has more, starting with the Middle East. Britt.
Yeah, there's no question that the stakes are high for this election overseas. We've seen international affairs as a priority on the campaign trail, but of course, it's being closely watched by the international community. Here in the Middle East, everyone is watching who will be in the White House. In Israel, Trump broadly is a popular figure, but it isn't lost on Israelis that the Biden-Harris administration have been Israel's biggest supporters overseas at a critical time after the October 7th attacks. Palestinians, as we understand it, are really more worried about the potential of a Trump presidency. But for Israel and its rival in the region, Iran, it's all about how a new president will respond to the conflict here. Dead in the water. Meanwhile, China, for them, Trump is the more unpredictable option. And on the looming issue of a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which we know is the reddest of reddest lines for China, there's a sense in Asia that a Trump presidency would really bring about more uncertainty. As for Ukraine, that's where the anxiety has been most palpable. Ukraine has received huge amounts of military aid as it fights against Russia's invasion. But for former President Trump, he's been very critical of Ukraine and the amount of aid that's been flowing in. It's been a huge hot campaign topic, and there are very real fears that a change in U.S. support will lead to one of two things: Russian firepower overrunning Ukraine, or a deal that would favor Vladimir Putin. So while the respective campaigns, of course, are focused on domestic issues, really the world is waiting and watching for who exactly they will be dealing with in the White House. Rhiannon, Andrew?
Our thanks there to Britt Clinton. Again, ABC News is projecting Donald J. Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. This after breaking that so-called blue wall, first winning Pennsylvania and then Wisconsin to tip the scales. He becomes the first president since Grover Cleveland to serve two non-consecutive terms as president.
Also winning the popular vote as well. Our election coverage continues right here on ABC. Make sure you stay with us for more.
Hank used to suffer from what felt like a cold and flu medicine. Hank. Oh my gosh, that's nice.
What's lava? What God?
You've had taste made in the palm of your hand. Now we're in your home. Where the
damn.
Where style meets flavor. Wherever you need to be.
Where we bring the smoke and the fire. Taste Made is streaming in all the places good taste matters.
It's pretty freaking delicious.
We always pay the exceptional, the unexpected.
Where the reward is sweeter.
Now we're everywhere you need to be. Taste Made.
Football fans and competitors, especially when it comes to tailgating. This season, we've got new teams, new super fans here in the middle of City Park in Milwaukee. Oh, I'm getting excited.
Sweet, life is coaching. I want to help other individuals get back to their selfless, deserving parents.
Oh my God. I'm obviously the most selfless person I know.
I'm gonna show you my very best stuff. Let's rock it. Where is Zero? I want the enemy of the Empire caught. Join the Royal Guard. I'm all geared up for battle. Watch and be amazed. I know I can do this. I have to.
He did it. Look at the kid go.
It culminates within. Wow, you're just full of surprises. And everything happens for a reason. You might be the one. This is fantastic.
Right now on Good Morning America, first Trump triumphs. ABC News projects Donald.
I'll be fighting for you with every breath in my body. I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve.
What you are seeing is potentially Donald Trump on the precipice of the greatest comeback in American history. A president who left the White House the way he left impeached for the second time. 7 members of his own party voted to convict him in the Senate, facing multiple criminal trials.
Voters braving long lines all day, some waiting for hours after polls closed to cast their ballot.
I'm very excited. 10 out of 10. I was very happy. Actually, as soon as I voted, I sent I voted sticker to my mom and my sister.
Election workers counting votes through the night.
The key congressional competitions deciding the balance of power
To be for Democrats.
initiatives on issues like abortion.
I'm in my 20s now. I'm no longer a kid. Like, I realized, oh my gosh, like, these are things that are affecting me in the future and my friends and my family.
Our team is tracking it all. What we're learning about the future of the nation and what it could mean for you. Welcome back, everyone, to our election night coverage right here on ABC. I'm Rhiannon Alley.
And I'm Andrew Dimber. Donald Trump is projected to become the 47th president of the United States. With a win in Wisconsin, Trump cleared the 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. He also defeated Vice President Harris in battleground Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina.
Trump did not mention Harris in his speech, but he did thank supporters in West Palm Beach, Florida this morning, also promising to help unite and heal the country. Harris did not come out to speak with supporters gathered at Howard University in Washington. ABC's Alex Perche begins our coverage this half hour from Washington with much more. Alex, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew and Rhiannon. This was overwhelmingly a good night for Republicans. They made gains in the House and gains in the Senate. Donald Trump about to make what would be the greatest political comeback in American history.
This morning, Donald Trump ready to become the leader of the free world again.
This was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
The first upset of the night coming with a win in North Carolina, the first swing state to go red. Then Trump edged out Harris in Georgia, securing 16 electoral votes and slamming the door on the hopes of flipping the state for Democrats.
This is looking very bad. She's done very well. She has to do very well, but she's fallen short of where Joe Biden was.
Vice President Harris won the West Coast, along with most of the Northeast.
That she wasn't able to turn out her own base in some ways in those big urban centers in the way that she needed. And despite painting such a dire picture of a second Trump term, ultimately it was that question of whether you are better off now than you were 4 years ago that Donald Trump hammered throughout this campaign.
Harris opted not to speak.
The fact that Kamala Harris is going home tonight, I think, is amateur. This pathway for her might be narrow, but it's also might be walking through the eye of a needle. She should say something to the people that adopted her as their nominee because they were just told by the president to do so. And she's leaving the country hanging now all night. And I think it's ridiculous and it's childish.
Long lines weaving around polling places across Pennsylvania late into the night near Lehigh University, some waiting 7 hours to vote as the Harris campaign handed out food and water. But in the end, Trump claimed the state's 19 electoral votes, paving the path to victory. Republicans also seized control of the Senate overnight, flipping multiple states and securing a 52-48 majority, a critical race that helped Ohio, where Trump-backed Republican Bernie Moreno flipped the Democratic seat held by 4-term Democrat Senator Sherrod Brown.
So President Trump, if you're watching, thank you. Thank you for being decisive in my primary. Thank you for being the greatest president of my generation. And thank you for the sacrifices that you've made for this country.
But Democrats did see a win for reproductive rights in multiple states from Nevada to New York. Arizona, a historically conservative state, approved its ballot initiative to cement abortion rights into their state constitution. Abortion was illegal there after 15 weeks. It will now be protected to the point of viability, which is between 22 and 24 weeks.
Exit polls show that Trump got a huge boost from Hispanic voters, usually reliably Democrats. Trump was able to close that gap to just 8 points, which is the closest margin since exit polls began. Rhiannon?
All right, our thanks there to Alex Perche live for us in Washington. Now, one of the top pollsters in the entire country, Frank Luntz, is talking about this morning's results, saying Vice President Harris failed to define herself and saying she pushed away men.
Frank spoke to us just a short time ago.
When she turned on Trump, started to call him a fascist, started to use her most vicious terminology for him, is when she started to fall. And the fact is, this race was winnable for her. First month, the first year. She never communicated that, at least to the level that the candidate they didn't like but agreed with on affordability and security. They had to know where she stood. She never crossed the threshold. This is going to be the conversation we're going to have for days and weeks. She never crossed the threshold of credibility. Why she changed her position on certain issues. What she would do when she got the chance to do the job. And the fact is, she should have challenged Biden, and she should have separated herself, differentiated herself, and she didn't do it.
Our thanks there to Frank. Now, history was made overnight, so let's get some historical perspective on Trump's projected win.
ABC's presidential historian Mark Updegrove joins us. Mark, have we ever seen a political comeback like this in presidential history?
Andrew, we've heard like this. This is a spectacular comeback on the part of Donald Trump, and I'm not sure anyone could have predicted this. We've seen other people come back in history. We heard about Grover Cleveland being a non-consecutive president, being both the 22nd and 24th president. Donald Trump obviously becomes the 45th and 47th president, but look at what he came back from. 2 impeachments, a defeat at the polls in 2020, January 24 felony accounts, and so many other things, and yet he rose up from the ashes and mounted a movement around economics, around kitchen table issues, and he won a resounding victory early this morning, Andrew. It can't be stated enough. This is a remarkable comeback.
And he even mentioned that in his speech. He called it a political victory no one has ever seen. Mark, what are your thoughts on this time in U.S. history? The country is so divided. What could come next?
Well, I think you're so right, Brandon. You saw in these 2 candidates such vastly different views of not only our nation, but our place in the world. And so obviously you're going to alienate some folks by, Donald Trump's being elected. I think it is up to Donald Trump to unite this country if he wishes to do so. He is to be a uniter in his first term. He's talked about this as being a term of vengeance and vindictiveness. So we will have to see what this holds. And Donald Trump talked about unity tonight. We have to take him at his word, and we'll see what happens in the policies that he puts out, and whether he continues to reach out to all Americans and try to unite us after this very divided time in our history.
Mark, you mentioned that we haven't seen a comeback like this. How do you think history will look back on this election?
Well, I think that you have to look at this, Andrew, as a movement, a very powerful movement. And what the Republicans did very effectively is put together this sort of patchwork quilt of rural counties, and then chipped into the lead that Kamala Harris had in many of the metropolitan areas, and manufactured what is a stunning victory, not only for Donald Trump, but if you see the coattails he had, it was a great night for Republicans. It bears mention, until tonight, had only won one popular vote since 1988, and that was George W. Bush in 2004. So Donald Trump not only won the Electoral College, but the popular vote, which he was not able to do in 2016. So a great night, not only for Donald Trump, but for the party that he leads, Andrew.
A stunning win for both Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Our thanks to Mark. Coming up, a closer look at what a Trump transition will look like in Washington.
Don't go anywhere. Our coverage continues in just a moment.
The legend begins all over again. It's bigger, better, and more intense than ever before. Welcome back to Fear Factor. 5 teams, 5 finals, 1 winner. Fear Factor.
Ah, shit.
It's hard to know where to start with so many premium shows to choose from.
You like to watch?
So get your favorites in one place on the Roku channel. Premium subscriptions on the Roku channel. Start a free trial today.
Why not for social media? Yeah, I suggested that I could